Hi everyone, welcome back to another macro video. This time I'll be showing you some test results of the newly released Nisi 49mm close-up lens that I paired with the Canon EF 100 to 400mm telephoto zoom on the Canon R7. I've already done a similar test with the Raynox DCI-250 on the same telephoto zoom lens, and I'm expecting identical results. Even if you have a different camera body but a similar telephoto zoom, you'll be able to draw some conclusions as well. I have a number of reviews of all the close-up lenses in Nisi's lineup and also the Raynox DCI-250 and also a couple of comparisons. So if you're interested, you can check out those videos as well. I will leave all the relevant links in the description. Let's start with how the magnification ratio is affected when this close-up lens is attached. The basic magnification ratio of this telephoto zoom at the telephoto end is relatively high, comes in at 0.31x, but once you attach the 49mm close-up lens, the magnification ratio goes well beyond the 1:1 life-sized magnification. You can clearly see that in this comparison where I took 2 consecutive shots of a matchstick with and without the close-up lens attached. The depth of field is extremely shallow even at f11. The minimum focusing distance was also significantly reduced from 98 centimeters to within 10 centimeters, so you gotta be aware of that, as it can get quite difficult to approach certain subjects such as skittish insects. By the way, the actual setup process was fairly straightforward. I decided to combine multiple step-down rings. I had the 49 to 67mm attached, which came with this close-up lens kit, and then I also combined the 67 to 72 and the 72 to 77mm adapter rings, which made it compatible with the filter thread size of the 400mm telephoto zoom. Attaching it to the lens was very easy as well. It only took a few seconds. For lighting, I had my usual speed light, the Canon EX2 RT, and for diffusion I decided to remove my reflector and my primary diffuser and only attach the bonnet diffuser to the front part of the lens barrel, which still provided plenty of diffusion. I spent about an hour looking for some interesting subjects in our garden, and I managed to grab a few interesting frames, mainly single shots, but also some stacked images of a bar class, which I was really happy about. Handling this setup is quite difficult, I must say. It's quite front heavy due to the weight of the lens and not something that I would normally use for macro, but it's always fun to experiment with your gear. Finding your subject in the viewfinder is already a challenge in itself. Focusing on the right area of your living subject, which is going to be the eyes most of the time, is going to be quite difficult because of the aforementioned super shallow depth of field. Even if you move just slightly, you might already lose your subject completely, which can get quite frustrating at times. Let's talk about the exposure settings a bit. For the shots that I'm about to show you, I used an aperture of f11. The ISO was base ISO 100 and the shutter speed varied between 1/100 and 1/200 of a second, depending on the ambient light. I also manually changed the output of the speed light to optimize exposure. Anyway, let's jump into Photoshop and have a look at the test shots that I got. Alright, let's start with the single frames first, and the first batch of images shows a beautiful female bronze hopper. You can already see how shallow the depth of field is with these single shots. I tried to nail the focus right on the eye, and you can see that it was relatively sharp. You can already see a little bit of color fringing, which can easily be corrected in Lightroom or in Photoshop itself by using the camera raw filter. And let's just zoom in on this segment. This is where the actual focus was on one of its front legs, and that's at 200%. And there's plenty of detail. I mean, considering that this is a telephoto lens and this specimen is less than a centimeter in length, or around a centimeter or so, this level of magnification is well beyond 1:1. I'd say almost close to 2:1, 1.67 at least. Let's go to the next image. This is a side portrait. I finally managed to focus on the eyes. You can see the tiny hairs around the front eye and plenty of detail in these hairs covering its abdomen as well, and the cephalothorax. You can already see, if you look closely, a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of a swirl or weird circular distortion. That's due to the focal length as well at 400mm, plus the actual concave shape of the close-up lens, but the distortion is not too bad, but you can definitely notice it. Alright,
let's move on to our third test shot. Another portrait. You can see those huge globular front-facing eyes. They look pretty cool. And here you can see that distortion that I had mentioned before. Next image, the fourth image, another one where I nailed the focus right on the eye. Here the green color fringing is much more apparent. Let's just go to the camera raw filter, go to the defringing panel. Let's just hit that, and then we've got it fixed already. Hit OK, and that's it. That's much better. You could fine tune it even more, but it already looks a ton better. And the last shot of our first subject, just another portrait from a slightly different angle, from an oblique high angle. Those legs are massive. Alright, so this is our first subject. In this second series of shots, you can see some water droplets that I captured on our succulent. I didn't quite nail the focus in this first image. It was super difficult. There was a little bit of breeze, and it took me quite a few attempts to get this shot. And even though I tried to focus right on the edge of this little droplet, I failed, but it's not too bad. The focus was right there inside this little bubble. What's apparent in this first image is the vignetting that you will get by using this setup. It's nothing significant, and it's easily fixable once again by using the camera raw filter. Let's just go to the raw filter again, and then go to the vignetting slider, and then you can just remove it very easily, just like that, and then hit OK. Let's go to this second image. Here you can see that the sharpness doesn't suffer that much if you manage to nail the focus. Once again, the depth of field is super shallow. You can see the reflection of my bonnet diffuser there, and this is the lens itself. I can see its reflection, so the sharpness is pretty damn good, I'd say. And let's go to the last shot, which is from a different angle. These tiny little water droplets have plenty of detail. Color fringing is apparent once again, but nothing major. In these next three shots, I will show you some pictures that I took of lichen that's been growing on our fig tree in the backyard. Let's zoom in to 100%, or actually to 200%, so you can see how much detail is rendered. It's unreal. I mean, the size of these little caps or cap-like structures would be millimeters, and the detail is amazing. The depth of field is super shallow, of course. Let's have a look here. Yes, it is pretty sharp, right on the edge. Bit of chromatic aberration once again. And let's go to the next one. This one was taken at the lower magnification at 100mm, these first two shots. Let's zoom into 300% this time. There's so much detail. I'm really surprised. I thought it was gonna be a little bit mushier than that. Extremely sharp right there. But the problem can be that with this extremely shallow depth of field, you really need to find the right angle, the most optimal angle, to be able to get something that's usable. And then this last image, this was at the 400mm. The depth of field is just crazy shallow. 200%, and right there, and then gets blurry immediately. I mean, you can create something really artistic, and you can get creative with this setup, that's for sure, because of the beautiful bokeh. Alright, let's go to our third batch of images now, or fourth actually. Our next subject is an orb weaver that I was struggling to capture because of the constant breeze that I had that day. And luckily, after the 15th attempt, I managed to nail the focus right on these eyes. There is so much detail. This is the lower magnification shot, so I managed to place my subject on the left side of the no-roll point. I kind of like this framing, and these subsequent images were taken at the maximum magnification, and I was struggling a fair bit because of the breeze. I just couldn't nail the focus. It took me at least 40, yeah, I'd say 40 to 50 attempts to grab a shot where I managed to nail the focus on the eyes, just right there. And these are the shots that I'm about to show you, just demonstrate how shallow the depth of field is. The focus was on the front legs there, rear leg here, and if I zoom in on the abdomen, you can see that only the peripheral part is in focus right there, and the top part is completely blurred. So you will need to start stacking with this setup ideally. These next 3 shots I'm about to show you are single frames as well. These are the urticating hairs of a caterpillar. I can't remember the exact species, but I've seen them around. How interesting are these structures, these little defensive organs that are protecting them against potential predators. Really impressed by the level of detail. Looks really nice. And in this next shot you can see the head of this caterpillar. These simple eyes look amazing. The mouth part is clearly visible as well at 200%. I'm really happy with this image. It was quite difficult to nail the focus, and I think I got just lucky with this one because it kept moving its head. Let's just close these. And I'm really surprised that I managed to capture a springtail. You can see the distortion again, especially in the middle. These little circular lines, and this globular springtail was approximately 1.5 to 2 millimeters in length and was foraging. You can see that it was eating something. Let's zoom in a little bit more to 200%. You can see the simple eyes, those ommatidia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 I can count. But even with this small specimen I would have had to take at least 4 to 5 images to get the entire specimen sharp enough and in focus from front to back. So this was the last of the single frames, and now I'm gonna show you some stacked shots. So let's just go through these. I grabbed 9 shots of this bar class that I mentioned at the start of this video, and let's just zoom in. So you can see how shallow the depth of field is. Only this part of its thorax is in focus right there. And just move through. The position changed slightly. Here the eyes were in focus, super sharp. And I was really happy with that. Here the focus was even further back. And then the focal plane changed here too. And then move back towards the front part just to make sure that everything is on focus, and the mouth part as well. So this is the final stack that I got. I blended everything in Photoshop. Some parts look weird, such as this section where the images were not properly aligned, or the antenna of this specimen slightly moved, which could easily be fixed by using the clone stamp tool or the healing brush tool, or I could just blend in a separate layer manually. And then I've got the cropped version where I changed the angle, I rotated the image and sharpened it a little bit, so you can see that the level of detail is exceptional. And I forgot to mention that this was actually taken at the lower end of the magnification at 100mm, because the sharpness was a bit better, plus I didn't want to scare the specimen away. The working distance was slightly longer for these shots. You can see the simple eyes there, the 3 simple eyes and the compound eyes. Let's zoom into 300%, and the level of detail is amazing. I really like these intricate details and these interesting patterns on its head. Looks ridiculously cool. And then I attempted to do the same at the maximum magnification. Let's just zoom in, and you can see super tiny details on the antenna of this specimen. And then I tried to do a bit of stacking and took 13 images for this one. I think this one turned out okay as well, but I prefer the lower magnification shot. And this one was the final stack that we got. Let's zoom in. And you can see so much detail at 200%. Crazy. Some parts are missing, some focal planes are missing. That's why I prefer the first image at the lower magnification. But this is really, really impressive. I never expected this to be able to render this much detail. When I use the Raynox DCR 250, which has slightly lower magnification at +8 diopters, I didn't get this much detail. So even though this setup has a few disadvantages, the primary being it's heavyweight, but that's due to the weight of the lens itself, I think the results speak for themselves. Once you start stacking, then you can get some really beautiful and decent results. The chromatic aberration and the vignetting can easily be fixed. You just gotta practice and you gotta get lucky, and the conditions need to be optimal for you to be able to take decent enough shots.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have found this test quasi review useful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you're new to my channel. You might also want to have a look at these videos next. Thanks again, and catch you very soon in the next one.